I love to sew, and I love to quilt, but my paper crafting hobby leaves me little time for my sewing hobby. But you can bring the two hobbies together by creating a quick and easy paper quilt. Let me show you the tools and products you're going to need for this technique. First, you're going to need some sort of adhesive, and I'm using my Glue Glider Pro. Then you're going to need some cardstock. For the base of my quilt, I'm using a piece of Gina K Designs Pure Luxury Craft cardstock, and I've cut it to 4.5 inches by 4.5 inches, so I have a nice square. And then I have some ivory that I'm going to layer my finished quilt on top of before I adhere it to my card. Then you're going to need to choose some pattern papers. And I've chosen 3 different patterns from the new Cosmo Cricket Garden variety, and I've cut 3 of each of the 3 different patterns into 1/2 inch squares. So to begin, let me grab my craft piece of cardstock, and I'm going to lay out my squares the way I would like it to look as if I was quilting. So I'm starting like this, and I'm just going to lay them all out. Now, when you make a quilt, it's kind of neat to have the patterns and the colors in all different directions and all different places. So rather than putting all of this color down in the row, I'm going to stagger it all over the place. So I'm going to put that one there. And same with the patterns. I like to stagger the patterns too. So I have my stripes going this way in this piece. I have them going this way in this piece. And then my final one, I'll put that there. This one here. And that there. And now I've got a nice quilted pattern, a block pattern that I like. So my next step is to adhere the squares onto my craft cardstock. And I'm going to do that starting in the top corner using a little bit of Glue Glider Pro. I don't have to use a lot because I'm actually going to sew all of these squares together. And I'll use that top corner as my guide. And then I will continue adding these squares across the entire square block. Now, as you can see, I've adhered all of the squares onto my craft piece of cardstock. And you can see I have a little bit of an edge sticking out. So what you want to do with that is you just want to trim about 1/8 of an inch off all the way around the perimeter to make sure that all those edges are nice and clean. And so now I'm just taking this about 1/8 of an inch over, and I'm cutting, and then I'm turning it, doing the same thing, about 1/8 of an inch. And now my quilted piece has perfect edges going around, and it's all ready to start sewing. At this point, I have my Janome Sew Mini ready to go. I've loaded it up with some lemon yellow thread, and I'm going to sew the seams between my paper quilt blocks. Now, I'm not going to show you a close-up of that. If you want to see how I stitch, you can watch any of the Janome Sew Mini videos that are at stamptv.com, and you can see exactly how to stitch, where to position your presser foot to get even stitching between the two sides of the paper. But I'm going to do that right now here on this cardstock, and then I'll show you the finished product. Okay, and now I've finished my very last seam. Let me get that out of the way and show this to you. Now you can see I've stitched down this way, and I've turned it, and I've stitched down this way. And I've got all of these loose threads hanging everywhere. Now what you're going to do with those is you're going to turn over your paper quilt like that, and then we're going to put a little bit of glue glider like that. And then we're just going to tuck those onto the tape, and then we can cut off the excess. So they're going to be tucked behind the card. Oops. There we go. Now all your threads are tucked behind, which gives you a nice clean look on the front. Now we're going to add that onto our piece of ivory. And for this one, I made a bigger border. For my card project, I made a little bit of a smaller border. And now I'm going to secure the entire thing by stitching around the entire perimeter of this quilt. Okay, now I've finished stitching around the entire perimeter. And let me just trim off my edges here. And then I'll give you a close-up view of the finished product. Doesn't that look pretty? Now you could have done the same thing by attaching this paper quilt onto some craft cardstock, like I did here in my finished project. What a pretty heartfelt look. Paper quilting is a great background for get well, sympathy, welcome home, new baby cards, and so much more.